Hello children, welcome back to 8th standard biology class. In the last class, we were discussing about sexual reproduction in human beings. Just recall what are the parts of male reproductive system and what are the parts of female reproductive system and what is fertilization. Up to there we have discussed. Let us recall once and then let us continue the class. The type of reproduction that begins with the fusion of sperm, male and female gametes or sperm and ovum is called sexual reproduction. So what is sexual reproduction? The type of reproduction that begins with the fusion of male and female gametes is called sexual reproduction. And let us see the reproductive parts, male reproductive parts of human beings. Which are the male reproductive parts? A pair of testes, two sperm ducts and penis are the reproductive parts of males in human beings. And the testes, what are the functions of the testes? The testes produce the male gametes called sperms and a hormone also called testosterone, about which you will learn in the next lesson. Reaching the stage of adolescence, in that lesson you are going to learn. Millions of sperms are released or produced in the testes. The sperm cell, the structure of sperm cell, observe it has three parts: head, middle piece and the tail. Tail helps in the movement. The sperms are considered as the single cell. So each sperm is a single cell with all the usual components of the cell. Testes produce the male gametes called sperms. Millions of sperms are produced by the testes. And female reproductive parts are a pair of ovaries, oviducts, or oviducts are also called fallopian tubes, and the uterus. Look at the structure of female reproductive system. A pair of ovaries, a pair of oviducts or fallopian tubes. See, this tube which take the egg to the uterus is the fallopian tube or oviducts, and uterus which opens through the vagina. And what is the main function of ovary? It produces female gametes called eggs. So monthly, every month a single egg, matured egg is released into the oviduct by one of the ovaries. So every month one matured egg or ovum is released from one of the ovaries. And what is the function of uterus? Uterus is the part where the development of the baby takes place. Like the sperm, egg is also a single cell. Look at the structure of female egg, how it is. It is a single cell consisting of cytoplasm, nucleus and cell membrane. All the cell components are present. Now let us move on to the next topic called fertilization. And by now you know what is fertilization. You have learnt in 7th standard also. In sexual reproduction in higher plants you have learnt. There also what it is: when the male gamete fuses with female gamete and zygote is produced. What do we call this process? Fertilization. So can you recall and tell me what is fertilization? It is fertilization is the process of fusion of sperm with an ovum. So the process of fusion of sperm with an ovum is called fertilization, which results in the formation of zygote. What happens here? The sperm is also single cell, egg is also single cell. The nucleus of the sperm fuses with the nucleus of the egg to form single nucleus in the zygote. You can see here the process of fertilization. Thousands of sperms are produced, but one sperm fuses with the egg. So when one sperm fuses with an ovum or egg, what happens? The nucleus of the sperm fuses with the nucleus of the ovum to form a single nucleus, and a zygote is produced. Observe here the fusing nuclei. One nucleus is from sperm and one is from the egg. They fuse to form single nucleus and zygote is formed. So as a result, the zygote is formed. Since the zygote is formed, with the fusion of male and female gamete, the resulting individual will have characteristics of both the parents, male parent also and female parent also. You observe in your house only, your brother or sister, observe they have, or even you have some characteristics from your father and some characteristics from your mother. So the resulting individual will get the characteristics from both the parents. Why? Since the zygote is formed by the fusion of male and female gamete, the resulting individual will have the characteristics of both the parents, male and female parents. Now, fertilization can be of two types. Fertilization may take place inside the body, internally, inside the body of a female, or fertilization may take place externally, outside the body of a female. Accordingly, there are two types of fertilization, which are the internal fertilization and external fertilization. As the name tells, internal, it takes place inside the body of the female. So what is internal fertilization? Fertilization that takes place inside the body of the female is called internal fertilization. And you might have observed in human beings also, the fusion of male and female gamete or sperm with the ovum takes place inside the female body, or even in birds also. In birds also, fertilization takes place inside the female's body. So this type of fertilization is called internal fertilization. Human beings, cow, goat, sheep, cats, and not only that, birds also, hens and other birds also undergo internal fertilization. What is meant by external fertilization? External, as the name tells, the fertilization occurs outside the body of the female or outside the body. This type of fertilization which takes place outside the body of the females is called, means fusion of eggs and sperms. Fusion of eggs and sperms take place outside the body of female in water. Such a fertilization is called external fertilization. It occurs in animals like aquatic animals, particularly like fish, starfish, etc. Not only that, amphibians, frogs and toads also undergo external fertilization. So this is one difference between internal and external fertilization. And what other difference is there between internal and external fertilization? Internal fertilization has an advantage because here the survival chance is more. One more difference is there, less number of eggs are produced by female, which undergo internal fertilization. Less number of eggs are produced. Consider human beings only one egg monthly it is released. And even if you consider birds also, very less number of eggs are produced and the chances of survival is more. They are safe since the process takes place inside the body. It is safe and the chances of survival is more. One more difference is less number of eggs are produced during internal fertilization by females, and there are high chances of survival of the offspring. And external fertilization, if you consider, here the animals which undergo external fertilization produce large number of eggs, and there is more chances of destruction of eggs because of many reasons. Let us discuss that later. Because of destruction of eggs, even though large number of eggs are produced, these eggs are exposed to water and rainfall. Not only that, some other aquatic animals eat them also. So the survival chance of the offspring is low. So what is the other difference here? In external fertilization, the animals, females, produce large number of eggs. Even then, the chances of survival of the offspring are very low. And examples are internal fertilization occurs in human beings, cows, cat. Not only that, all mammals, what we call, they undergo internal fertilization, and even birds, hence sparrow, all birds undergo internal fertilization. And the examples of external fertilization, animals which are living in water, aquatic animals like fishes and starfish. Not only that, amphibians, amphi means both. These amphibians live both on land and in water. Since they need water to complete their life cycle, means they lay eggs in water. Hence these frogs and toads are called amphibians, means they live both on land and in water, means they need water to complete their life cycle. So in these animals like frogs and toads, fishes and starfish, etc., external fertilization takes place. Now let us try to understand how external fertilization occurs in frogs and toads. What happens? During spring season or rainy season, these frogs and toads move into slow flowing streams or ponds. They move into water bodies like slow flowing streams and ponds, and their females lay thousands of eggs. Large number of eggs are laid by the females, and these eggs are not covered by hard shell like birds' eggs. These eggs are not covered by hard shells like eggs of birds. Here the delicate shell it is, means not called shell also, a jelly like substance holds the eggs here. So there is no hard shell present in amphibians like frogs and toads. Instead, there is a jelly-like material or substance that guards the eggs and holds them together. So eggs are held together by jelly-like substance instead of hard shells. As the female frogs lay their eggs, male frogs, what they produce or deposit the sperms over them. So when the female frogs lay eggs in water, male frogs deposit sperms over them. This results in external fertilization. See here, the eggs are released by the female frogs in water, and male frogs also deposit sperms over eggs in water, that is outside the body of the female, so that fertilization occurs outside or external, and the sperms come in contact with the eggs in water. So fertilization occurs externally in water. Then what happens? Though eggs are large in numbers, very few survive and change into young ones. So survival chances are very less here, even though thousands of eggs are produced. Why? Some factors hinder the process of fertilization here. Which factors hinder the fertilization? Since the eggs are released into water, these eggs are exposed to water movement. So most of the eggs may be destroyed. Not only water movement, they are exposed to rainfall also and winds also. So by flowing water, rainfall and winds, many of the eggs may be destroyed. Not only that, other aquatic animals may eat these eggs also. Because of these factors, the process of fertilization is hindered and there is less chance of survival of individuals. So even though large number of eggs are produced, very few of them survive and they become new individuals. Very few of them survive because of these factors like exposing to water movement, rainfall, winds and other animals also feed on them. They will be destroyed and there are less chances of survival. Question will be asked for 1 or 2 marks. So you write all these points in your notebook. So every time when the lesson I take these points must be written in your classwork without fail. Now let us consider how internal fertilization takes place in hens. Birds undergo internal fertilization. By now you know what is internal fertilization. Fertilization means fusion of sperm and egg takes place inside the body of the female. Such a fertilization is called internal fertilization. Let us try to understand how internal fertilization takes place in hens. So what happens here? Hens reproduce by laying eggs. After the formation of the zygote, internal fertilization takes place in hens. Sperm fuses with the egg to form zygote. This zygote divides repeatedly and then travels through the oviduct. What happens? The zygote produced as a result of internal fertilization starts dividing repeatedly and travels through the oviduct. At this stage, what happens? The different layers, protective layers, are formed around the fertilized egg. During this stage, different protective layers are formed around the fertilized egg, and then it turns into a hard shell or covering of the egg which protects the embryo present inside. So that inside the hard shell there is embryo which develops into chick in 3 weeks. So embryo inside the egg takes about 3 weeks to change into chicks or to develop into chicks. So then it takes almost, what happens? When this hard shell is formed, then the hen lays eggs. You know that till then the process is internal. Means when the eggs are fertilized, the eggs are covered by protective shell. Formation of shell completes and the hen lays eggs. Then the development takes place outside the body. Up to this, the process takes place inside the body. Then when the hard shell is formed, then the hen lays eggs. So that what happens? After the laying of eggs by the hen, it takes about 3 weeks for the embryo to develop into chick. So there about how many weeks it takes for the development of embryo into chick? 3 weeks time is needed for the development of embryo into chick. And in this time period, the hen, have you ever observed? The birds sit on the eggs. Why? To provide sufficient warmth, the birds or hen also sits on the eggs to provide sufficient warmth. Then the eggs hatch into young ones called chicks. So in this time when they lay eggs, and there are 3 weeks time needed, I said no. During this 3 weeks time, the hen sits over the egg to provide it sufficient warmth. Then what happens? The eggs hatch into young ones, or young ones are hatched from the eggs. Now this is about how internal fertilization takes place in hens. Here say fertilization in birds is internal, but once when they lay their eggs, further development takes place outside the body. So we say here in birds fertilization is internal, but the development takes place external. But in human beings, cats, cow, dogs, sheep, etc., what we call mammals, both fertilization also takes place inside the body and development also takes place inside the body. So there is difference between reproduction in birds and mammals. There is main difference. Their fertilization is internal in birds, development is external, but in human beings, cat, cow, dog, etc., both fertilization and development are internal. Now, have you heard of test tube babies? What are test tube babies? Do you mean babies, do they born in test tubes? never possible. It is not like that. Some women have some problem in the oviduct or fallopian tube. They may have blocked oviduct or fallopian tube, so that sperms will not reach the egg and fertilization cannot take place, and such women cannot bear children. So they cannot be able to bear children. Those who have blocked oviduct or fallopian tube. In such cases, the doctors collect the freshly released egg from female and freshly released sperms from male, and in the outside environment in petri dish in the laboratory, they are allowed to fertilize outside the body. In vitro fertilization they conduct. The meaning of in vitro means outside the body, egg and sperms fuse to form zygote. In the petri dish means since it is outside the body, the process is called in vitro fertilization. In vitro means outside the body. So under aseptic conditions, when the doctors collect the egg from the female, freshly released egg from the female and sperms from the male, and they allow them to fuse outside the body in the petri dish under aseptic laboratory conditions. Suppose if fertilization occurs, sperm fuses with the egg to form zygote. One more week the development they observe, and after a week of fertilization, this fertilized egg or zygote is transferred to the mother's uterus or female's uterus. There the further development takes place, and after 9 months the baby is born like any other women gives birth to baby. The same procedure. She gives birth to a baby. Since the fertilization is carried outside the body, it is in vitro fertilization. So since the babies that are born with IVF process means outside the body, this fertilization is carried. This process is called, or the babies born by this process are called test tube babies. It does not mean that babies are born in test tubes. Never possible. So this is how test tube babies are born. In short, you just recall what are test tube babies. In women who have blocks in their oviducts or fallopian tube are unable to bear babies because of blocked oviducts. As I said, sperms cannot reach the eggs and fertilization cannot take place. However, what the doctors do, they collect the freshly produced egg from the female and sperms from the male, and the process of in vitro fertilization is carried out. Means in vitro means outside the body, the fusion of sperm and egg takes place externally outside the body, and when zygote is formed, if fertilization occurs, zygote is formed. Zygote thus formed is allowed to develop for a week, and then outside the female body only 1 week the zygote is allowed to develop. Later, in safe conditions, it is allowed to develop 1 week outside the body, and then it is placed in the mother's uterus or woman's uterus. After 1 week, the zygote produced is placed inside the mother's uterus or woman's uterus. In this way, further development takes place inside the woman's uterus, and women can bear babies. Since the babies that are born with IVF process, the babies born are called test tube babies. Now let us try to understand the development process in human beings. So far you have learnt how the development takes place in hen's body. Internal fertilization takes place, but the development takes place outside the body. But in human beings, fertilization also takes place inside the body of female, and development also takes place inside the body of the female. Let us try to understand how the development takes place. Observe this picture. Here, look at here. Every month, as I said, ovaries produce eggs. Every month, one matured egg is produced from one of the ovaries. This process of release of a matured egg from the ovary is called ovulation. Suppose if this matured egg produced gets fertilized with the sperm, zygote is produced. Fertilization takes place, zygote is produced, and this zygote transfers or it travels into the uterus and gets attached to the wall of the uterus. Observe here, the zygote gets attached into the wall of the uterus. This embedding embryo you can observe here. What happens when the zygote is formed? It starts dividing repeatedly and forms a ball of cells. And these cells group in different groups, and in this stage it is called embryo, and this embryo gets attached to the wall of the uterus. So this process of embedding embryo, what we call, later when the embryo gets embedded in the wall of the uterus, the further development takes place. The embryo develops the parts, individual parts such as hands, legs, feet, ear, eyes, etc. All these parts develop, and the stage of the embryo in which all these individual parts are identified is called fetus, and further development takes place in the uterus, and 9 months it takes for the development, complete development, and later the baby is born by the rhythmic or continuous contraction of the muscles of the uterus. So let us learn more about this in the next class. See you then. Thank you.